Hi, my name is Jason Rosette. I'm a U.S. citizen living and working overseas as an educator and media practitioner for well over a decade. One reason I've stayed overseas as long as I have as an expatriate is due to the low cost of overhead out here. I'm able to afford housing, groceries, and transportation while working remotely and in person. With internet access, I'm able to undertake about 70 to 80% of the tasks I would be able to in the U.S., even though, ultimately, I would prefer to be living in the U.S. Back in the U.S., with the exception of a few notable periods where friends and family provided free housing, I often scraped to get by. You can take a look at my documentary I made about my life as a sidewalk bookseller in New York City called Book Wars for an inside look at my lifestyle back then. Over the years, I've also worked as a paperboy, a caddy, a house painter, a carpenter. I've done construction, video editor, a voiceover talent, background actor, shooter, producer, and more. Over the past decade, I've tried to head back to the U.S. several times to resettle. As we haven't had a family home there for some time, I've usually made do with sleeping on friends' couches or renting a room through Airbnb for $50 or $75 per night. Then I'd continue to seek work and housing, burning through my savings until I'd reach a tipping point where I'd need to decide if I'd risk it further in the U.S. environment or head back to Asia, where I am now. Once, for instance, I took a chance with my last savings on a trip to San Francisco to undertake the State Department's Foreign Service oral examination, a career track which I'd been pursuing for some time. And that was my second invitation to interview for the Foreign Service, and this was the final stage of the selection process, so I had to take a chance on it. However, I didn't make the cut. I headed back to Asia with $400 in my pocket left, and I clawed my way back into solvency over the course of a couple years through teaching and an assortment of side gigs and part-time work. Most recently, in May 2023, I was accepted to a digital media master's degree program at UCF in Florida, which I'd been pursuing for some time. The plan was to utilize the master's program as a means to build up my skill set in that area, while setting myself up back in the U.S., in Florida, where my elder mother lives alone, so I could keep an eye on her too. I even had a teaching assistantship with tuition waiver, a salary stipend, and health insurance offered to me as part of my acceptance. So this was a plan I'd spent 2 years putting into action. I was very excited. Every piece was finally in place for my long-awaited return to the U.S., except for one missing element: housing. I couldn't afford the housing. My overall finances were still coming up significantly short, and I wasn't in a position to take out student loans as I have in the past. Regretfully, I had to pass on that life-changing opportunity. Now, I'm seeing, hearing, and reading a lot about the substantial benefits illegal aliens to the U.S. are gaining as they settle in America's cities, like my former home of New York City. These alien non-citizens are getting housing stipends, cash grants, and health care, none of which I've ever enjoyed even as a law-abiding U.S. citizen. Therefore, I've now decided to join these aliens and to utilize their approach to resettle again in the U.S. with some form of federal subsidy, which will enable my return after nearly a decade of trying. I will cross the border under a pseudonym as an alien and claim asylum in the U.S. On or about Christmas or New Year's of 2023-2024, I'll cross the U.S. border as an illegal alien migrant, removing and securing my U.S. citizenship documentation before I cross the border. I'll do so under an alien pseudonym. Suggestions are welcome in the comments section, and I will then claim asylum in the U.S. The asylum-seeking approach has shown promise for thousands of undocumented aliens who have gained federal resettlement subsidies so far, and I now therefore consider it a tried and true method, part of the new American way, which I would like to utilize as well as a U.S. citizen. After claiming asylum under my pseudonym, I'll then request to be sent to New York City, possibly Los Angeles, and I will utilize the subsidized housing, health care benefits, and whatever cash grants may be available while I secure employment and permanent housing and begin my new life back in the U.S. As I lived in New York for more than 10 years as a freelancer and gig worker, paying taxes without health care or subsidy of any kind, often living in small, shitty, and expensive rooms, I therefore feel justified in pursuing this option. I estimate I'll have several years before my asylum case comes up in order to reestablish myself back in the U.S. I expect my asylum case will be denied, at which point I'll exit the U.S., retrieve my passport and U.S. citizenship documents stored safely in, for example, Mexico, and then return properly to the U.S. as I normally would to continue to lead the new life I established as an undocumented alien migrant. I've now learned, after years of trying to resettle back in the U.S. the normal, honest way, that illegal aliens are being granted favor in the current U.S. system. As a working-class, straight, white male from the Midwest, it appears I could be unsuccessful in returning to the States unless I utilize the most creative of methodologies in my future efforts. If you can't beat them, join them. If my plan is successful, I'll finally return to the U.S. as a U.S. citizen, but claiming asylum first as an undocumented alien under a pseudonym. I'm still seeking information, suggestions, legal advice, and media and journalistic contacts for my upcoming effort. Please leave any ideas or comments or suggestions below in the comments section. Thanks very much. I'm Jason Rosette.